we'll go from there. Hello, everybody. This is the second class in our series introducing the Talmud to Christian skeptics, atheists, agnostics, and anyone else who would like to learn about it. In the first session, we kind of did some introductory material, a little bit of a Q&A to sort of just unpack some of the issues of terminology, language, some issues in modern Judaism. And so I think what we'll do now is start back, rewind the tape, so to speak, to use an outdated metaphor, and we will go back to the beginning. And I'm assuming that most of you are familiar with biblical history up to a point, so we won't really unpack that. And rabbinic history doesn't really relate to that in a broad sense. We can say that rabbinic Judaism begins whenever the Torah is written down, because as soon as you write down a text, you have to interpret it. And you need to copy the text in the ancient world. And the rabbinic movement starts from the scribal tradition, which had the function of copying the text. There's a lot of debate about when the text of the Torah was written down, but I'll just go off standard-ish dating, which is kind of in the maybe around 500 BCE, more or less, right? There's a lot of debate about that. 700 to 500 is sort of traditional scholarly opinion. A lot of newer work is pushing that up a little bit. Jonathan Adler has a book out about 200 CE, looking at the archaeological evidence, not when the Torah was written, but when it was practiced. So there's a lot of different debates there. And this is not really important for rabbinic Judaism because it is in a certain sense, but to understand the history of it is not super important. But as soon as we start writing the Torah down, we have to interpret it. And the people who write it down are the scribes, and they are the ones who know the text the best, together with the priests, and they're the ones who begin to interpret the text. We have the first indications of rabbinic style thinking in the book of Sirach, or Sirach as it's known in Greek, in the Septuagint, which is included in the Septuagint. Is probably the first figure that is that demonstrates some level of rabbinic style thinking. And it's probably from this tradition, which some scholars like Boccaccini, for example, calls sapiential Judaism. The wisdom tradition is kind of maybe where that is coming from. These are just broad generalizations, not really any consensus or really something that I want to dive into too deeply. But during the Hasmonean period, we have the Pharisee, the beginning of the movements in Judaism, basically, with the Pharisees and Sadducees. And the Pharisees and Sadducees are the power. They kind of compete for power in Jerusalem, and it seems that the Pharisees are more popular among the people. The Sadducees come from the high priestly families, and they differ. Sorry, my cough might be coming back to me here. We'll have to see how far this goes. But so the Sadducees and Pharisees oscillate with power and the control of the understanding of the practice of the Torah, essentially. So when we're looking at the rabbinic texts, they are going to be, we're looking at the period from around the time of Jesus and after Jesus, actually, essentially, because before the the prominent text. Let's go back to the diagram here. It's actually kind of helpful to see. Second. Too many tabs. Okay.
But while you're doing that, just quick question: were there any Pharisees that were high priest, or was that strictly a Sadducean deal?
I don't think that there were any high priests that would be counted as. Oh, here it is. Okay, that would be counted as Pharisees, but there were a number of priests that were. So the priests tended to be Sadducees, but they didn't have to be.
Okay.
So the text, so the Torah is what we have from the Bible. Pentateuch is obviously the first five books of Moses, the prophets and the writings. That's how Jews divided the text of the Hebrew Bible. Um, this which is more or less it's different from how Christians lay it out. So the prophets includes things that would Christians would consider prophetic, but also books like Joshua, Judges, Kings, um, and First and Second Samuel are in the prophetic section, and the writings includes things Psalms, Proverbs, Kohelet or Ecclesiastes, Esther, Ezra, things like that. So the last book of the Hebrew Bible is Second Chronicles, and uh, the weight here is on the Torah section. The prophets and the writings are less important in Judaism than in I wouldn't say less important, but you don't derive law from them technically, so they don't affect daily practice. And also, the prophets are kind of understood differently, or they have a different role in the practical practice of Judaism. So, and so let's just familiarize ourselves with some of the terms, and then we'll go back and kind of look more in depth. But so, I'm trying to zoom in here. Okay, we go. Okay, so it has the names of the five books of Moses, which is in Hebrew Bereshit or Bereshis. This is the Ashkenazi pronunciation. Shemot or Shemas. I don't do the Ashkenazi pronunciation well, but Vayikra, and we have Bamidbar and Devarim. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy in English. So what happens is that when Jews talk about the Torah, it's the written Torah and the explanation of the written Torah, which is the oral Torah. That's what's understood to be the two Torahs. So the written Torah is this part here, and then the diagram here is showing you all the different components of the written Torah, of the oral Torah. Sorry. So there were early texts that are called Mechilta, Sifra, and Sifri, which are what are called halachic midrash, which is like interpretation to understand how to practice the laws of the Torah. So the Torah has many laws, such as you shall honor your mother and father. You shall you shall worship God when you rise and when you lie down. You shall cover I'm trying. I don't know them in English. I'm trying to think of how they're pronounced in English, but it's like be fruitful and multiply. That's one of them. How do you do this? What does it mean to be fruitful and multiply? That's sort of a question that's a lot of times asked of Christians. So if you ask a Christian, a Jewish person asks a Christian, what is the first commandment in the Bible? So I'll ask you, both of you, that. What is the first commandment in the Bible?
Is it be fruitful and multiply?
It is. I gave you a hint with that one. And so the question is, when have you been fruitful? When have you been fruitful and multiplied? When do you know that you've done that?
When you've had kids, I guess.
There's how many kids?
Oh, it's a good question.
So you need to have two children for it to count. Okay. So, so and does it count? Can you fulfill that with having a boy and a girl? Depends on the point of view. Sometimes some people say you need to have two boys for that to count. Some say a boy and a girl will count. What if you only have one child? Can you fulfill the commandment? Some say that you can through your grandchildren if your child has children. So this is what the point of the Torah is the laws are given in the written Torah, and the oral Torah explains how to do them. So the text that we have down here are the explanations written down. So the oral Torah was meant to be transferred from mouth, by mouth from one teacher to student, as best as we understand. The academic understanding of this is probably, we could poke a lot of holes, but I'll just give you kind of like the traditional understanding of it. So the traditional understanding is that God gave to Moses the written Torah and then explained every commandment how to fulfill it. And over time, these oral explanations were written down out of necessity. So this happened mostly due to the destruction of the temple. So all of the writings of the oral Torah come after the destruction of the temple. And the rabbis understood that there was a special dispensation to write down the oral Torah. It's actually forbidden to write the oral Torah. So you're not allowed to write the oral Torah in a scroll. So all the Torahs are written on scrolls, which is how they're done today. Even to this day, they're read from scrolls. But oral Torah is not allowed to be written on a scroll. It has to be only. It can only be written sort of. It's understood to be like an emergency decree to be able to write down these texts, basically. And that explain when we look at them later, we'll see. You can kind of see how that looks in practice. So the first texts that are written down are what are called legal interpretations, where the rabbis are looking at the text and trying to understand how to practice them, basically. And then we're going to ignore the Zohar for right now because that's a big different issue. So the Midrash is here also includes legal and non-legal interpretation. So how do you understand the text? Like, what does it mean? What do certain words mean? How does that reflect the values of God, of the Jewish people? Ethics, that kind of thing. This is all midrash here. The Mishnah is the most important text, which is really the definitive version of the oral Torah that was written down. So this was sort of commissioned by the rabbis after the destruction of the temple. Excuse me, and it includes these sections, which are really different books. They're called tractates, and they deal with different topics. So it was kind of grouped together in topics. Seeds refers to like agriculture. So how do you deal? Because there's a great deal of commandments about agriculture. What can you plant together? When can you harvest the fruit from a tree, et cetera, et cetera. Seasons refers to the time of the year, so the different holidays. Women is the laws of marriage, divorce, things like that. Damages is civil law. This is like the classic case in the Torah is like, if I damage my neighbor's ox, what do I do? So that's all of those kinds of things. Holy things has to do with the temple, and purities is like the system of ritual purity. So these last two are not in a force now. And the other four are in force, except for agriculture, kind of with an asterisk. But the main ones here are the seasons. Excuse me, 1 second. Sorry about that. Something's kind of tickling my throat. Okay. So these three are in force, and actually, up to this day, the rabbinical courts can resolve damage disputes between parties, and depending on the jurisdiction of the state and things like that. These are the topics in the Mishnah. Okay, we're gonna skip over these two for right now, and then we'll get to the Talmud. So there's actually two Talmuds, and we'll see what that means later, but it's basically where they're written: Israel and Iraq, basically Babylon. And the Talmud is the Mishnah, and then sort of extra material, which is often called commentary, but it's not really commentary. It's I would liken it to legal court recordings, proceedings from the court, basically. And so these are like, you could have case law, you can have anecdotes that support as like evidence in a case, basically. You can have a lot of superfluous miscellaneous material that is just sort of there for as how it was formulated, it was meant to be a recited text, especially in Babylon. And so the text was formulated together, and people memorized it and recited it. So the way that it works is that it uses the flow of the language to bring up the next topic. So if the sentence ends with, I don't know, date trees, then it says, "Oh, I remember this story about this rabbi and the date tree," and it has to do with, and it's not really related, but it's the chain of how you remember text. So and you can see from the way that the Talmud is like composed that it was meant to be an oral text. Like they were trying to preserve that quality of it. And then we'll kind of stop there. The rest it goes further, but this is just a nice diagram to kind of see how you get from the Bible up here to the Talmud down here. So I'll pause for a second if anyone has a question or reflection or anything like that.
There are these two separate texts there, the Babylonian and the Jerusalem Talmud, or are they both pretty much the same with slight differences? Or
Yeah. So if one, I failed to mention that the Talmud was composed in it's hard to know exactly the dating. The Mishnah is typically understood to be dated around 200 CE. It's written as a timeless text, so it's kind of hard to date because it's kind of written to not be dated, if that makes sense. And the Talmuds are usually dated 150 to 200 years. The Jerusalem Talmud, so it's like 350, 400-ish, somewhere in there. And the Babylonian Talmud is written around 500 CE, perhaps. We're not 100% sure about those dates. It's kind of a guess. The difference in the text is one language. The Jerusalem Talmud is written in Western Aramaic, which is different, just a different dialect, basically. The Jerusalem Talmud is typically kind of shorter and harder to understand. And this is kind of understood as like the rough draft, basically. It was the first one. And the Babylonian text is a little bit more expanded and easier to understand. Also, the Jerusalem Talmud deals with all of this, the agriculture, because it's written in Israel, where the agricultural laws apply, because agricultural laws don't apply outside of Israel. So the Babylonian Talmud doesn't really talk about the agriculture stuff. And then the rest, there are some differences of opinion. So you'll have some legal decisions where a different conclusion is reached to in Babylon versus Jerusalem. And nowadays, basically nobody studies the Jerusalem Talmud. It's not very, when you say the Talmud, you mean the Babylonian Talmud, unless you say Jerusalem Talmud. So whenever the Jerusalem Talmud is referenced, you put Jerusalem Talmud in the front, and that lets you know that it's not the Babylonian.
okay.
So I know there's the Mishnah, and then the other parts. It's the Gemara, right? Am I correct with that?
Yeah. So the Talmud is broken up into the Mishnah, which is this, and the Gemara just refers to the other text, which is case law, proof, things like that. Yeah.
Are there differences in authoritativeness between those two sections, or am I thinking of it wrong in terms of being authoritative?
Yeah. So this is best seen, I think, if we just kind of look at it, actually. So let's just jump
Okay.
in. So if we go here, we'll start with the first Mishnah. I think it's always kind of interesting to see the first Mishnah, and then actually let me do like this. No, we'll do this. Okay, sorry. So we'll start with the Mishnah, and then it makes more sense when you see it kind of in. So it starts with the phrases "Meimatai korinet shema ba'avit." So that's the first phrase. And just to save time, I'm going to do the English part. But so the first Mishnah and the whole entire thing starts like this: From when does one recite the Shema in the evening? There's no introduction. There's no table of contents or anything like that. This is the first statement in the Mishnah. So when you see this as a person who's never seen the Mishnah before, what questions, and you can kind of read the rest. I'll read it a little bit, and you can think about questions that you might have from the time when the priests enter to partake of the terumah until the end of the first watch. This is the statement of Rabbi Eliezer. Okay, so that's the first clause of the Mishnah. So as you, as a person who's never seen the Mishnah before, what questions do you have?
Mishnah is Talmud, right?
What's that?
Mishnah is Talmud.
Mishnah is included in the Talmud, yeah.
Okay, so I've seen the Talmud. I've read 3 chapters of it or 5 chapters, and I was like, I think it was time for me to put that away for a it was talking about bread and whether you were violating the Passover if someone threw you a loaf of leavened bread while you were standing under the eaves of the house, but not inside the house.
Yeah.
And I was like, I think maybe I've got someplace else I need to be
Yeah.
spending my time.
Yeah,
So,
you're ahead of where you should be. So
yeah. So
So,
questions I would have from reading Mishnah, which is part of the Talmud.
or
I
just you don't
believe
even
that
really have
is
to focus on the different parts. Just reading this text here, the bold text, that's the translation. The regular text is things that they've added to help you understand. But just looking at the bold text, what
bold
question?
text.
Yeah.
From when one recites Shema in the evening, from the time when the priests enter to partake of their teruma, until the end of the first watch. So the first watch is from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m.
But well, that's a good question. What is the first watch? Yep. Okay.
I mean, historically,
Yeah.
the day was three shifts,
Yeah.
and each of them
Yeah.
were
So
8
you might
hours.
you might have some inclination, but that's one thing you wouldn't know. Like it doesn't tell you what this is,
Well, the
right?
three shifts of 8.
Yeah.
Um, End of the
It
first
also
watch would be 4 p.m. I think.
Yeah. You might also wonder what is the Shema? It doesn't tell you what that is either, right?
The Shema's a prayer, right?
Yeah, it is. But I'm just saying from based off what the
Hear, O
text
Israel, the
tells you.
Lord your God, the Lord is one.
Yeah.
Isn't that the Shema?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. But
Okay.
but it doesn't tell you what that is in the text, right?
Okay.
It
what
doesn't
is that taruma? What is that?
that's another what is teruma? Yep. That's another question that you have. You might also have who is Rabbi Eliezer, right? So there are a number of the point of it is you can see the orality of the text. It's meant to you are meant to have some background knowledge when you go into this, right? You should have already you're kind of meant to know some things when you go into it, or you're meant to be learning with someone who's going to explain to you what these things are. Right. So, and you might also ask, why does it start with the evening instead of the morning? If we're talking about that, what is, if this is the first question that we have, why does it start with the evening? So we can say that the Shema the is kind of like a prayer or a declaration of belief almost that is recited in the morning and the evening. The priests obviously are the ones descended from Aaron. And then we have the terumah, which is kind of like a tax that was levied on agricultural produce, where you had to give a tenth of what you produced to the priests first. The first watch is more or less what Ray was saying. That's kind of how the day was divided in ancient times. So so the question is, when can you recite the Shema in the evening? What is your time frame? The opinion of Rabbi Eliezer is this is what we just saw here, from when the priests go to partake of the terumah, which means the end of the first watch. The rabbis say, as a group, they respond to Rabbi Eliezer and say that you have until midnight. Okay, so that's the second opinion. The third opinion is from Rabban Gamliel. And again, you're going to see more questions. Who is Rabban Gamliel? It doesn't tell you who he is. We can, if when we're here, we can click this and it will kind of give us some information over here. And he was a very prominent rabbi in the late first and second centuries. That would be good to know. And when you're studying with someone, they will tell you that information. And then he says that you have until dawn. So we basically have the question is, from when can you recite the Shema? When do you have to recite the Shema? So this is also presuming that you know that you have an obligation as a Jewish person to recite the Shema in the morning and the evening, and so you need to know when do you have to say that. What is your time frame basically? And we have until the end of the first watch, until midnight, or until dawn. So those are the three opinions that it's presenting in the Mishnah. And then they're going to tell a story. So there's an incident about Rabban Gamliel's sons who returned from a wedding hall. They were having a little bit too much fun, right? They were at the wedding and they were drinking and they, did not recite the Shema. So they asked him if the dawn has not yet arrived, you are obligated to recite the Shema. That's what he tells them. They're, they wanted to know, do they need to say it or not? And he says you have to, if it's not done yet, you still need to say it. And so, and then Rabban Gamliel adds that there's a clarification that when the rabbis say that you have until midnight, what they really mean is that you have until dawn. But they're telling you midnight so that you're extra careful and you say it early so you won't get into the situation of forgetting and missing your obligation to say Shema. And there's going to be some stuff here that's kind of not important, so we can skip down here. And we say, so why did the sages say until midnight? And that is in order to distance a person from transgression. Okay, so you can see here, you might have the question, which one of these opinions is it telling you is correct? And it's basically saying that it's the rabbi's opinion, with Rabban Gamliel adding the clarifying remark that helps us understand what it is. So we don't actually follow Rabbi Eliezer's point of view, which is included here. That's a feature of the Mishnah. It includes opinions that are not accepted by the rabbis. So then let's go to the and I've kind of forgot what the question was why we jumped over. What was the question that we were looking at?
I think I asked about differences in authority between.
Oh yes. Okay. So basically, what you're going to have. Let's go over here to the Gemara. In this case, it's implied that the rabbi's opinion is the one that's accepted. So typically what happens is the Mishnah is the most authoritative because it's the written oral Torah. However, in some cases, the Mishnah doesn't come to a decision, or it doesn't tell you what what we call the halacha, what the practical application of the law is. So then you have to go to the Gemara to look at it. So just to give a little flavor of what the Gemara is like, you're going to see here that this is the Gemara, the addition of the Talmud to what we're just reading. And so what it says is the first part of the Gemara is on basically, why does it start with from when? Why do we start with this question? It's kind of a weird way to start the book, to start with the question, from when do you have to start to say the Shema? That's the opening question of the Gemara. And then it's why do you start with the evening? Wouldn't it make more sense to start with the morning? Because people typically think of the day starting between the morning and the evening, right? So that's the first two things that the Gemara is asking. So in this case, it's helping us understand the Mishnah a little better.
I think the Jewish folks thought that the day started with the sunrise, and then it was probably the Romans that thought that the day started at midnight.
Yeah. So Ray's a little bit ahead of us because that's what they're going to say now, right? So they say the Tana, Tana means this is something we're going to come back to later, but it basically means the person who's reciting the Mishnah. They would have someone who would be Tana means to recite, so a person who had memorized the Mishnah and would recite it for them to talk about it in these sessions here. So, so they say, okay, the text that we use to talk about the Shema is from Deuteronomy. So if we click on this, we can see the full text over here. And it's talking about when you lie down and when you get up. So the first way they derive that you start from the evening is from the verse itself. Because it first says when you lie down, and then it says when you arise. So it's talking about evening and then morning, right? That's the first one. And then the second part, it's going to talk about the story in Genesis, where it says in the creation of the world, it talks about evening and morning. And that's how it was understood in the biblical period.
That makes sense.
Sorry, I'm going to end the screen share because we're out of time again. It looks like in a few minutes here. So does anyone we have about 9 minutes left, it looks like, on the free recording here. Does anyone have questions or comments?
Just one thing I noticed when reading through that initial passage there. What's the difference, or is there one between a rabbi and a rabban?
Uh, um, Rabban was the title used in Israel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
And
good question.
rabbi could be anywhere.
Yeah. Mhm.
You mentioned Ben Sira. Is that the same as Sirach in the Catholic Bible?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Because
Uh,
it's got the thing there on the scribe. You mind if I recite it here?
sure.
Uh, how different the one who devotes himself to the study of the law of the Most High. He seeks out the wisdom of all the ancients and is concerned with prophecies. He preserves the sayings of the famous and penetrates the subtleties of parables. He seeks out the hidden meanings of proverbs and is at home with the obscurities of parables. That's Sirach 38 on the scribe. One of my favorite things. I'm Catholic, so I've got the Catholic Bible, so I go through that.
Yeah. And Ben Sira is an interesting character from the rabbinic point of view because he's they cite him a lot in the Talmud, but it was eventually decided that he should not be in the canon for um, reasons, we'll say, which is it's probably like a reaction to Christianity, that it's not included. But and it was assumed at one point that there was not a Hebrew original, but it has been found, the Hebrew
Wow.
text from it. From what I understand, maybe not the entire text, but I think it was found at maybe Qumran, I think is where it was. But it was known in Greek for a long time. So um, that passage is definitely kind of the attitude, the uh, disposition, I guess you could say, that developed among the rabbis.
Nice. Very beautiful.
So the Babylonian Talmud, the Babylon, I guess around that time, what, 300, 400, 500, was
Mhm.
that like a center point of Judaism at that time? Would you say that that was kind of like the epicenter of
Uh,
Judaism?
yeah. As you guys probably know, the diaspora was quite large during the first century CE, and there were Jews throughout the Roman Empire. But the Jews in Babylonia had existed from since the previous exile, that was, that's recorded in the Hebrew Bible. So it was a large center, and it was probably not the largest center at the time of the Talmud's composition, but it definitely became the largest center in what's called the Gaonic period, which is from like 600 to 1000 CE. It was the center of Jewish. It was the Jewish center of the world, because the descendants of the Davidic line were called the Exilarch, and they moved from Israel to Babylon, and continued to serve in leadership roles until quite some time after, into the Common Era. And so I guess 600 to 1000 would be the early medieval period, I guess you could say, for the world. That they would essentially address issues of law. Jews would write letters to Babylon, and they would write a response to it. And it became a different form of literature called the responsa literature. So there's thousands of letters that you can look at online where they would say, oh, I have this friend who, she got married to a man, and he went away to war, and then we thought he died, and she got remarried, but then he came back. What are we supposed to do? Things like that, like very practical letters that were sent, and they would write a response to it, and it basically became part of Jewish, like the case law, for
Hmm,
how to deal with practical issues. Yeah,
very interesting.
yeah. I think you'll probably get just kind of the flavor of the Talmud is that it's completely different from Christianity, um, right? Just from the where it comes from, what its aims are, and like how it just feels as a sort of um, thing that like as a text that you interact with. I don't know what impressions you guys had, um, just based off seeing the text.
Yeah, I mean, I just it does seem quite different, especially how it gives so many different opinions. And as you were saying, that some of them, on some cases, it's not settled, and so you have the Gemara that comes in and tries to offer more clarity.
Mhm.
How large is it? It strikes me as like encyclopedic almost. Like
Oh
what is it,
yeah.
like 20 books or like
Uh, well, it's probably around 2 million words, the Babylonian Talmud.
wow, wow.
That's something I didn't really mention. It's a huge corpus, so it's larger than Josephus. I don't remember. I think Josephus is 300,000, maybe 600,000, something like that. Uh,
Okay.
so it's
It takes
definitely
up about 4 feet of a library shelf, and then you've got the Jerusalem one there as well, and that takes up another 4 feet.
yeah. The Jerusalem Talmud is smaller, but it's large still, and so it's really a library. And it's not something that you would be able to sit down and read without understanding what you're getting into. So, in terms of the manuscript tradition, we do have after each text that was composed, we have about 100 years after each one. We have texts that corroborate the existence of it. However, the only existing complete manuscripts that we have are from the 1200s, I believe. The Talmud has the unfortunate reality of being not a very popular book. It's the most burned book, probably. A lot of the manuscripts have been lost due to the book burnings that happened in Europe and things like that. And also just preserving such a massive text is kind of a hard thing to do. You can compare the various manuscript traditions. They're no, I haven't done a complete analysis, but just when I have used or needed to do variant analysis, there's going to be a number of quite a large variation with a text that large, but it's not overwhelming. Just to the variation, but there is variation. And that was something that the medieval rabbis dealt with, which they call girsa, which is like the I guess kind of like the text that you have. So like they would, debate about whose text was more correct, basically. So
Hmm.
2 minutes. Anybody have a last minute thought or reflection? All
Thanks.
right, so I
And
guess we can.
looks like you're still busily getting over COVID there. So
I am still getting over COVID.
make
So
sure you rest up there. We want to make sure you're healthy here for a long time going forward.
Yeah,
thank
absolutely.
thank you. So I guess we can continue next Sunday.
That'll be that'll be great. Yes.
Sounds good. Yeah, thank you so much.
See you guys later. Bye bye.
Bye now.
Have a good week.
You too. Bye.